My name is Tamsin Omond and I am sort of an environmental activist, but I'm actually one of the speakers, so trying to encourage the audience to think about environmental justice and what they can be doing to move us towards a low-carbon economy.
Why do you think that intergenerational fairness has become increasingly an issue in the last few years?
I think it's just really evident that the world systems do not have the future generations in mind. So we have this economic crisis which is going to leave my generation greater in debt than any other generation could have ever imagined being. And then we also have this problem of climate change, which again will leave us in ecological debt so that we will have fewer resources for more people. And I think that people are starting to really worry about what that future will look like. And that concern is slowly turning into action. What's kind of depressing is that the people in charge tend to be people who aren't actually going to be around to see the full impact of their actions right now. So we really need young people to be pushing for change.
And what sort of action can be taken?
Good question. I think I like to believe that everybody I think it's really clear that everyone in all of the kind of arenas that they inhabit can be more like activists. So, wherever you work, you don't need to give up everything and become a campaigner. You can ask your workspace to be greener. You can ask your family to think about, the carbon footprint. You can ask your street to start thinking about it. So I think it's just really important that we start considering future generations. And the second that we start considering it, that will translate into action.
You mentioned you're specifically concerned about green issues, but are there any other of the main planks of intergenerational fairness affect you personally?
That's a good question. I think kind of obvious ones like I don't know when I'm going to buy a house or what that house will look like when I do get around to it. Things like property prices. I can't remember what the exact figures are for the time when people of my generation are getting onto the property ladder. There's just so much economic uncertainty. I'm not one of the million unemployed in this country, but a lot of my friends who graduated with good degrees are. You see them becoming more frustrated and more angry, and all of the kind of innovation and excitement that you associate with youth is kind of it's like sapping from them. We're in London Zoo and I wandered around the zoo for just 20 minutes, and it's really depressing to see how many of the species here are extinct or going extinct in the wild. There are so many privileges that the generations before us have just taken for granted. The privilege to clean air, the privilege to knowing that these species exist and knowing that you can travel by plane to see them. And those realities are all changing. And that's a tricky moment to be at, especially as a kind of young adult, trying to work out your way in the world and knowing that the whole dynamic of the future has changed, that you can't base your assumptions about the future on on how it's been before.
What do you think of the work that the Intergenerational Foundation is trying to do?
I think the work of the Intergenerational Foundation is extraordinary and so important at this very moment in society. The context is changing massively for the youth, and we need people speaking up for us and pushing awareness of this at the top level of government and beyond.
What about the role of government in intergenerational fairness? What can it do? Because politicians are very short-term minded, aren't they?
They are very short. So politicians are incredibly short-term minded. They only think 4 years into the future, and that means that they can kind of sit pretty on plans that don't support the generations that will come. It's really tricky. There needs to be much more debate with young people, but also I think young people need to be moving into those positions of power far faster. And I think it's so important and scary and daunting that people my age, I'm 27 and lower, need to be kind of manning up and taking on this challenge, because actually we can't rely on the politicians who are there to care about us. We can lobby and we can ask and we can do all of these things, but actually it's more important that we actually move into those positions of power.
Tamsin, many thanks for talking to us.